Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to be here with you today for the Washington Parenting Student Success Learning Series. My name is Amy Magasos at the Washington Student Achievement Council, where we focus on advancing equitable post-secondary attainment in the state. I'm thrilled to welcome over 100 registrants joining us today from across Washington, from campuses, community organizations, agencies, and many other organizations. Special thanks to the student leaders who are joining us today. And next slide, please. Today's webinar is part of our learning series on Washington parenting student success. So in February, we hosted an overview of the Washington parenting student landscape with highlights of a Student Achievement Council brief and an amazing panel of parenting students, campus partners, and the Urban Institute. And we'll share the recording for that in the chat. Today, we will be focusing on how data collection about parenting students can improve experiences and success. And we're delighted to have the expertise and multi-state learning provided by the Urban Institute to guide us in our exploration. Urban will continue to lead us in our second session on March 31st on what campuses can do to advance parenting student success. And our third session in May will explore how communities can work together locally across sectors to advance parents' access and success in post-secondary education. We hope you'll join us for all of these learning sessions and also share the invitation to this series with your colleagues and your friends who also care about parenting student success. Next slide, please. So I want to start by introducing a fantastic Washington core team that has been working together over many months to strategize on how to advance parenting student success in our state. So at the Student Achievement Council, I've been working with Abby Chen and also the Adult Pathways team with Ines Olive. With communities for our colleges, we're grateful for the collaboration of Xochitl Lopez, Gabby Fitz, and Fernando Mejia Ledesma. We also have collaboration of the Washington Campus Children's Centers Coalition and have been so grateful for the leadership of Ann Slaughter of Pierce College and Casey Lalonde of the Evergreen State College. And last but not least, the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges has been an important collaborator with Policy Associate Jennifer Dellinger and many other wonderful colleagues. So thank you all so much for our work together. Next slide, please. So you may be asking yourself, why focus on Washington parenting students? So I'd like to provide a little bit of background. The Student Achievement Council represents all sectors of education in Washington and is centered on advancing equitable post-secondary attainment through strategic efforts in affordability, enrollment, basic needs, and completion. So better understanding and supporting the needs and goals of the students who are also parenting is part of that state goal of advancing equitable post-secondary attainment. And we know that parenting students are a significant proportion of all enrolled students. We think that that's about 18% in line with the national percentage. Washington parenting students are disproportionately female, disproportionately students of color, and about 62% have low incomes. Washington learned in our 2024 State Basic Needs Survey, the Washington Student Experience Survey, that 68% of parenting students reported facing food insecurity and or housing insecurity or homelessness, and 3 in 4 struggle to have needed childcare. So with this in mind, it's especially important that we better understand who Washington parenting students are, learn from and build on current campus practices and policies, as well as community partnerships that support parents engaging with post-secondary. It's also important that we identify issues and strategic opportunities for Washington and for campuses and communities to advance parenting student success. So last October, the core team I just introduced, together with Wasac, co-hosted a strategy session with diverse collaborators from campuses, workforce development, student leaders, and community partnerships. In this, the participants identified key priorities and opportunities for Washington to advance parenting student success. Those included making parenting students visible through data collection, identifying and promoting strong campus practices and policies to support parenting student success, and supporting development of strong community partnerships. This led to the development of policy with the SB 6227 this session. This bill that was led by Communities for Our Colleges and the Post-Secondary Basic Needs Coalition in our state directed the state to work together to create recommendations for parenting student success through data collection, campus practices, and community partnership supports. So this bill didn't make it through this super fast-paced session, but it truly raised the banner of awareness that Washington parenting students are students that deserve our attention and support for their success. So I just want to highlight what we see as our opportunities at this stage. We really feel like it's important to deepen our knowledge about the three priorities, to build our network across the state, really engaging more partners across campuses and communities and agencies and other partners. And we want to be able to use this learning and our network, our growing network, toward recommendations and support of practices, policies, and partnerships to help parenting students be successful for themselves and for their families and for our communities. So, with that framing, I am so happy to pass it over to our fantastic partners at the Urban Institute, who will lead our exploration on parenting student data collection today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Amy. It is so nice to be here with everyone. I think it was only 6 months ago, Amy and I happened to sit at the same table at a conference, and here we are now, sharing some information about data collection for student parents. So the Urban Institute, we are primarily located in DC, but the team you have with you today is from DC, LA, and Wisconsin. So you get kind of the whole continental US here with you. So Urban focuses on research and policy to elevate the debate. And so one of the areas we focus on is student parents. And so you can see Teresa Anderson, who Teresa will chat soon about the data, really getting into the details of the data, case making work that she's really led. Kimberly is a former student parent and has been a wonderful colleague and advocate for student parents across many organizations. And then I'm a senior research associate at Urban and was also a student parent through 3 degrees and am really excited to build on the work that we've done with other student parents and our team at Urban as well. So today we're going to talk about several things. We're just going to give an overview again of the student parent landscape. Amy gave some of this information. The next thing we'll talk about is case making. Like, how do you really make the case and why should we support student parent data collection? Kimberly's going to talk about trust with data collection because that is an important piece of everything, especially in today's context. And then considerations for collecting student parent data. Teresa will talk a lot more about how to really get into the meat of it. We'll have a breakout room discussion. So get ready, comb your hair if you need to, put your makeup on, or you're welcome to stay off camera too if you'd like. But we'll also then talk about how you can really leverage student parent leadership to build movement around this issue on your campus in interpreting data and using data. And then we'll talk about resources in the next session, I think. So I'll share a little bit more about the student parent landscape. This is national data that we were able to analyze from the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study. Parenting students are really a key population across the nation. About 18% of all undergraduate students and more graduate students are student parents, and there are about 3.14 million across the US. Student parents are also a pretty important group for transfer. So many student parents who are at four-year colleges have some experience being at community or technical colleges. So really thinking of this as a really important transfer population. And then you can find out more at this QR code and at our site here with the link will be in chat, but Student Parent Action through Research Knowledge, the Spark website has a ton of resources and national information and national data about parenting students. As you all might know from your own Washington data, parenting students are more likely to attend community and technical colleges. So compared to, for example, four-year public baccalaureate institutions or private nonprofits, private for-profits. So 51% of student parents are at community and technical colleges compared to 40% of non-parenting students. And then they're looking, at the baccalaureate institutions, much less likely to be there, which is also an access issue. So thinking about your role in making, if you're at a four-year university, making it family friendly to build a pipeline of student parents with, four-year degrees or more. One thing to also note is that parenting students are strong, but they do face completion gaps. So they do have GPAs that are similar to non-parenting classmates. When we look at the completion gaps, only 17% of student parents complete a degree in 6 years, and that's compared to 50% of non-parenting students. They're 55% less likely to complete after controlling for other differences. So this is really a huge population for completion. Most are juggling caregiving, school, and work. So 73% of parenting students had a non-work study job and they worked an average of 36 hours per week. So a lot of part-time enrollment as well in college is kind of another feature of the student parent population. Student parents are also more likely to have had a longer gap or to, if they were already a parent, to, have a longer gap between high school graduation, college enrollment. So they may have it's maybe a feature of their population that they're more likely to delay between high school graduation and college enrollment. And then 1 versus 3.8 years on average. And then a focus on student parents means understanding which parents struggle to access college. So we had mentioned, four-year colleges and student parents as an access population, meaning they're less likely to access. That's also the same for young parents. That's my population of interest, having been a teen parent myself. And so this is some data that tells you a little bit more about young parents are much less likely to access college. But what could be done to make a more family friendly campus. So thinking about, there's a mom who helped interpret this data, and other young parents helped me interpret this data about the gap between young parents who applied and registered versus those who actually attended. So this young mom noted that twice as many young parents actually go to college as wanted to go to college. And she said, you can't really say it's for lack of interest or that they don't value higher education. There's some sort of barrier. So thinking about these different populations of student parents, including young parents, and how they are an access population or a completion population, and what that might mean for what colleges can do to support them. Then one thing that we wanted to mention is this has been a really great focus in terms of what has been going on nationally around legislative requirements for student parent data collection. There's been a lot and it's been really exciting. So Teresa will tell you a little bit more shortly about the work that we've done in many of the pink states, not all of them, but we are also working with states who have had data collection legislatively proposed recently, including Washington. And so this is a growing issue, and a growing number of states have passed this legislation. And so their colleges are really digging into this. Thanks, Teresa. I'll pass it off to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kate. Wonderful. I think a lot of things that I share are things that you all in Washington State appreciate deeply. This was You were very sophisticated in your appreciation of parenting student population. That was clear in the February webinar and in the work you all have done. So some of this is going to be like kind of quick because I don't know that you need like all the case making, but we're going to point you to some resources if you're talking to folks who do need that information. So hi everyone, I'm Teresa Anderson from Urban, as got introduced earlier. And I just want to say that we have data and evidence and that supporting student parents can be a win all around. It's good for students, it's good for children and families, it's good for states, and it's good for colleges. We I had a bunch of slides about all these details, but as I said, I don't think you need all those slides. So what I'm going to do is point you to this two-pager, Supporting Student Parents Pays Off. And there's a QR code here. We can drop the link into the chat for this. But this will show where support pays off to families and links to our research about the intergenerational benefits of moms going back to school. Support paying off for taxpayers including a return on investment analysis of different approaches to supporting parenting students that we ran in Virginia, but would certainly translate to almost any state context. Where it pays off for colleges, where parenting students are a huge some college no degree population, as well as just a no degree population, and could be a major source of recruitment. And then, of course, the expanding state policies, that map that Kate showed. But this also has the link to the specific legislation in the states that have passed it, so that you can see exactly how they framed their legislative approach. When we're talking about parenting students, perhaps it's obvious and perhaps it's not about why we start with data. The Oregon Campaign for Student Parent Data legislation had this motto, when you're invisible, so are your problems. And we very much kind of live by this in our work. Data motivate change. It's not enough just to know sort of the averages at the national, regional, or even state level. Colleges and college systems need to be able to identify how many parenting students they have and and how many they could be serving, what those characteristics are of those students, and then the trajectories, tipping points, and successes for their students. So that is part of where we came out with the Data to Action campaign for parenting students. It's a college learning community in states that have data collection mandates to help with data development to inform actions that would support student parent success. And you'll note that this map looks kind of similar to the other map. I probably should make Virginia green on here now too. Virginia just passed their legislation last week. But the green states are ones that had passed student parent data collection mandates. And the stars are places where we've worked with colleges in these states. And Texas just has a big star because it's 13 colleges and universities across the state. So just one big star for Texas. But we've been working with a cohort of colleges for, it's been 2.5 years now, to learn about, to learn from them and have them learn from each other and from us about how to collect data and use the data in a way that actually makes a difference for student success. So we want to share a few examples of how this data collection has made a difference at specific institutions. So one is San Diego Mesa College, which is in San Diego. They use student parent data to understand course completion rates. And from that, they learned that parenting students experience more challenges in certain courses, and that allowed them to implement parent-specific tutoring at flexible times that would work for their schedule. They also saw that a rule where missing 3 classes resulted in failure was causing higher failure rates for student parents, and so they're softening that rule to try to not disproportionately disadvantage them by their attendance policies. They also conducted a student parent perception survey and did student-led focus groups, and that led them to creating more kid-friendly spaces and student parent events. And they've shared that survey instrument with others, and another college in our cohort, Bakersfield College, ended up running a similar survey. So that's a great learning opportunity across institutions. We also wanted to highlight Cal Poly SLO, California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. This is what we think of as like a very quote unquote, big air quotes, traditional university, or so they thought of themselves. They thought they didn't have any parenting students, but they have a champion faculty member, Tina Chuik, who led this grant and pushed them to more systematically collect parenting status and created an infographic and college report, which was really powerful in this college to point out that student parents are an important population for the college overall, that they're an important population for the transfer centers because 6 out of 10 of the student parents had transferred, and that they were able to see where certain schools or colleges within the university had over and underrepresentation of parenting students, and they were able then to build pipelines and create more supports into places where they were underrepresented, and then, ensure their success in the areas where they were overrepresented. But having that information allowed for that targeting of support. Oh, and I should have said there's a QR code here if you want to see. They have the big data dashboard is public, which is really cool. And so that's like a nice thing too about like visibility and awareness. And then California State University Channel Islands did this nice analysis to try to look at what kinds of services students with dependents and students without dependents were using. So we see students with dependents here in the red. And they looked at different types, so advising center, student organization involvement membership, on-campus housing, learning resource center. I'm just going to call attention to, first of all, the no service use. They were surprised to see that the students with dependents in the red were more likely to have not used a service, which was important for them in thinking about outreach and supports. They also were a bit surprised that the food pantry, which is the one service they thought parenting students might be more likely to use because we know that there's a disproportionate rate of food insecurity, was actually less utilized by parenting students. So they're using this as a way to try to figure out how to redesign some of their services and supports to be more accessible and responsive to their students with dependent population. We also want to spotlight Klamath Community College, and we have I'm going to pull up the link here and hopefully it'll work. You know what I need to do is I'm going to have to stop sharing and reshare because I don't think I shared with audio. So I'm going to, but we're going to share this video that Klamath produced as part of their capstone. The capstone was kind of the final project for the Data to Action campaign colleges. And let me just get this up for 1 second here, and I will share it with you because I think that they say in their own words very well what better than we could say why data mattered for their efforts. Okay, I'm about to hit play here. Are you able to hear it?
As I reflect on our Data to Action initiatives here at Klamath Community College, especially from a data perspective, I'm filled with a sense of satisfaction, given all of the great accomplishments with the cross-functional team here at Klamath Community College, along with our peers at Urban Institute. We have successfully gone from a state where there was no data associated with our student parents to a state where we have extensive student parent data, descriptive data, that now we can use with factorial data in order to enhance our efforts via data-driven decision-making to help them achieve their academic goals. In reality, previous to the Oregon mandate and our collaboration with Urban Institute, we did not know much about our student parents. We could not answer simple things such as, how many student parents do we have? What is the age range? Now we can successfully answer those questions. Now we know that there are 147 student parents with an age range of 17 to 64 years old. Now we know that 65% of them are female and 45% of them do solo parenting. All of this data collection has facilitated our efforts in, once again, assisting our student parents.
It's overwhelming beginning college, especially as a student parent. You have more on your plate than a regular student. So it's important to remember that there's resources out there to help you succeed, whether it be your advisor holding your hand and helping you map out your successes, or the resources that we have on campus and the resources that we have in our community that we can help match you to through KCC.
What made me interested in joining the Student Parent Club is looking for support while at KCC. When I think about other student parents, I want to see what's working for them. How are you managing your time? Where are we finding childcare? what other resources are here to help us be successful at school?
Sustainability is a really important aspect of the campaign, and of course that's true for every grant-funded project that we work on. One of the things that we have in place as a result of the work that we've done together is we've decided as a college that the Student Parent Club is something that we are adopting and moving forward with, even though the student parent in our group has graduated from KCC and is moving forward into her first professional teaching job. We are actively looking for a student who has the want and availability to lead that student organization with us.
Moving forward, we will continue with our efforts of being truly purposeful and committed in our efforts to assess student parents. We have actually outlined 3 key actions. The very first one is the completion of the Early Childhood Care Center with a projected enrollment of 145 children. Secondly, we will make a true connection with our internal relevant resources, such as free diapers, wipes, the pantry, our changing rooms, and the student parent survey system collection. Again, because we want to continue collecting more data. And third, we will complete an electronic dashboard that will measure academic performance of our student parents in an effort to assess them academically, right, via data-driven decision-making. Ultimately, the idea here is that we will get to the point where being a student parent is simply an attribute rather than a potential hindrance.
We really love and appreciate them sharing that. Of course, if anybody wants to be in touch with them, Klamath is in Oregon, just not too far south from you all. But we think, again, that they kind of said it better than we could about why this data-driven work is so meaningful. So with that, going back to sharing the real slides here. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Kimberly Salazar, to talk about advancing student-parent success through trust, support, and data. Kimberly?
Thank you so much, Teresa. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Salazar. I'm a research analyst at the Urban Institute. I'm going to be discussing, again, advancing student-parent success through trust, support, and data. So as we know, student-parent data collection, a big core piece of this is cultivating trust. When, as Teresa noted earlier, when your data isn't being collected, your problems are invisible. And then to suddenly be spotlighted and then be told to be invisible, walking around feeling on campus, feeling invisible, to suddenly now have the spotlight on you and questions regarding children ages, there's going to be a level of skepticism that might arise. And so student-parent data collection efforts often encounter skepticism and reluctance shaped by historical patterns of visibility or adverse outcomes following disclosure. So an important part of collecting the data on parenting students and student parents is building trust. So robust data systems require not only institutional commitment and leadership buy-in, that is a key part of this, but another key part is also the activation of cultivating trust among student parents. Participation is another way to cultivate trust. Effective participation in data collection efforts, meaning engaging the student parents, parenting student as partners in data collection efforts, is most likely achieved when student parents perceive their information leads to meaningful and sustained positive change. So with this is the interplay of support of culture and data. As we've seen in that YouTube video with Louis at Klamath College, we saw how motivated student parents are to engage with colleges when there's a culture of support at the college. Student parents are highly motivated to participate when they see that their insights shape real change in both the institution And their engagement helps ensure that data leads to policies and supports that truly reflect their needs and strengths. So comprehensive support services serve as both a critical access point for identifying student parents' needs and also as an ongoing channel for dialogue and engagement. And we saw a perfect example of that with Climate Community College, an institutional culture that visibly recognizes and responds to student parents' realities directly increases willingness to participate in data initiatives. If you're seeing low response rates, if you're seeing this kind of reluctance, aiming towards an institutional culture shift will likely help with data collection efforts, and strengthening key support student hubs such as Transfer Center, EOP, first generation programs, and reentry centers, which we know a lot of student parents and parenting students participate in, creates culture shifts that makes data collection feel more routine and relevant rather than intrusive. So when student parents notice tangible improvements in their support networks, they're more likely to engage openly with data efforts. So advancing a student parent-centered campus, data, trust, and institutional goals. Enhancing and promoting existing supports helps strengthen and raise awareness of current resources, builds early wins, and demonstrates institutional commitment, and encourages student parents to engage and build trust. Lay the groundwork for robust data collection. So as student parents see tangible improvement and clear communication, willingness to participate in data initiative grows, leading to higher quality information over time. And this also advances college priorities along the way. This approach not only supports effective data collection, but it also contributes to core goals of student retention, graduation throughout the process. We know that when we're strengthening student supportive services that typically student parents find themselves in, such as Transfer Center, EOP, not only do student parents win, but all students involved in those programs win. So as we outlined this student parent-centered approach, we really accomplished three things at once. We saw that focusing on these aims builds trust, strengthens data pipeline, and moves the needle on retention and graduation. And that data piece is really foundational for everything else, which is the perfect segue, because before we can act on any of this, we have to think carefully about how we collect that data in the first place. And there are real considerations about what we ask, when we ask it, and how we make student parents feel safe sharing with us. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to my colleague, Teresa Anderson.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was wonderful. Again, folks, please, I love how there's some comments coming up in the chat about issues and opportunities that you're seeing. So please feel free to continue to add those or put in questions as we go along. We're tracking it and are glad to be responsive. Or just, I think others here are interested to hear how others are thinking about these issues. So that said, how do you actually collect data? Well, there's different points at which you can try to identify parenting students. One of them that's nearly universal is application. So that's sort of the state, the system, or college application. Typically, it's a one-time only data collection. And of course, there's things to think about with application, but it's nice because it has close to universal coverage if everyone completes it. There's also registration. So that could be a registration intake form for priority registration, for example, or it could be something in the registration process itself. So some states that have priority registration mandated have like a little form to do a couple weeks before registration opens to be able to identify who's eligible for priority registration. Or again, you can kind of have that be part of the workflow of registration, although folks have sometimes been hesitant to put in more barriers to registration in the process. So that's what's nice about the pre-form. Nudges or student information system profile, which we SIS for short. So you could have, like, when a student logs into their sort of, it's not the learning management system, but it's sort of like the system where they usually get their grades or find out information about themselves for the institution, that there is sort of a login question or a place that they can update their profile. Perhaps there's a pop-up or a banner, something where they see it when they log into that system, and they can put in their information about parenting status, and perhaps there's one or two other key questions that are really important for your service delivery to your students that can be changing over time. Surveys, of course, like a student basic needs survey. These can be internal or external. You can do these as often as you want. Of course, we know that response rates to surveys are not always as high as we would like them to be. We often hear 10 to 15% being kind of par for the course these days. And so that's going to miss a lot of folks, and it's more likely to miss the student parents who are the busiest and whom would most benefit from additional supports. Though we think surveys are great as a way to sort of follow up and get more in-depth information once you have the flag of who your parenting students are from some other data collection mechanism. There's also some external data, like public program data. We used to say FAFSA. Unfortunately, FAFSA is not really an option anymore, and I'm actually going to share this this link to a blog post we did about why FAFSA no longer provides useful information about most students with dependents, because the redesign, the simplification of FAFSA got rid of some things that were considered extra, and unfortunately, this is one of those things that they simplified out of the form in a way that's useful. So FAFSA wasn't awesome before. It is close to useless now. So there's other sources that need to be relied upon for this information. So our recommendation from our work with the colleges and the Data to Action campaign, and this was done through like iterative collaborative processes, is to have a question on application and then have some kind of routine data update, whether that's an registration intake or a nudge, but some kind of way to sort of check in with students approximately annually is ideal to see if their parenting status has changed, because we know this is a status that can evolve over time. And particularly if you define it as students with a child under 18, which some places do, it can also change where students are no longer considered parenting students for the definition that's being used. So again, this is something that can be evolving. We just put out this brief an hour and a half ago. So fresh, hot off the presses, how colleges can ask students about parenting status. We'll drop the link into the chat here, or you can scan this QR code, but it goes real practical about how do you get informed consent, how do you ask the questions depending on what your considerations are. And I'm going to breeze through these really fast so that we have more time for you all to talk with each other, but it's all laid out really well in this, like, ideally very user-friendly format. So the simplest approach, because a lot of folks were saying, okay, fine, we want to collect the data, but like, how do we word the question? It just felt like cognitive overload to figure out how to do it. So we wanted to really just lay it out. So the simplest approach is one question, one status. So you could either have a category selection, check the category that applies to you. I am parenting at least one child. Some places have like other statutory language. So I'm parenting or I'm the legal guardian of at least one child. Perhaps it's under 18 or other kind of definitional language. So you can tweak this to match the definition that either the state asks you to use or that you want to use for your own purposes, since there's no state mandate yet. So it can be I'm parenting, I'm not parenting, I prefer not to say. Or it can just be a yes, no. Are you parenting or acting as a legal guardian of at least one child under 18 or whatever other definition you need to put in there? Yes, no, prefer not to say. This is like a simple section. We do always recommend having a prefer not to say option. We like to make questions mandatory, but allow people to opt out. So you know, if it's not responded to, it's not just that they missed it, it's that they chose not to reply, but they have that choice because, again, disclosure should be with consent, and it's kind of coercive to not give folks an option to say, I don't want to give you that answer right now. And some people, it's just really complicated. Lives are complicated, and they just don't want to get into it. So they're going to say to prefer not to say, perhaps, in that situation. There's also a more nuanced approach where you can do sort of a check all that apply. So you could have parenting and pregnancy status, for example, all in one question. Check all the categories that apply to you. I'm parenting at least one child. I'm pregnant. I am not pregnant, but expect to become a parent in the next 9 months. This was raised around non-birthing parents or folks who are in the adoption process, perhaps, who are going to be parents very soon and might benefit from supports proactively. I'm not parenting, pregnant, or expecting, or prefer not to say. There are some trade-offs around pregnancy. We're doing work in Texas, for example, and there have been state laws that make people reasonably hesitant to disclose pregnancy. And so it might not be advisable in certain policy contexts for students to indicate they're pregnant, but there are more federal protections for pregnant students under Title IX, under federal Title IX rules. And so if students would like to disclose their pregnancy status, there's a lot more things that the college can and has to do to accommodate their success in education. And so there's some trade-offs. I'm thinking about pregnancy that we talk about a bit in the brief. You can also add child age categories. So similar format, check all categories that apply to you, but you could have I am parenting at least one child or children under 18, at least one child or children age 18 or over, if you want to kind of get those adult children that are still affecting the students, lives. And, you can also contract or expand age categories depending on what's important. And you can do more detailed versions. So I'm parenting at least one child or children ages 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 12, 13 to 17, 18 or older. Again, pregnant, if you want to have it, expectant, if you want to have that. And you can choose different age categories depending on, if you have a child development center on campus that takes children from a certain age range, you could try to hone in on students that are of age that might be eligible for that support, for example. It's nice sometimes to know who has school-age children because sometimes that can also help motivate alignment of schedules or policies with the public school system. If you know that a bunch of your parenting students have school-age kids that are going to be affected by mismatched spring breaks and things like that. You can also ask questions about students' number of children once you identify their parenting students. You could have a numerical entry. How many children are you parenting? You can have categorical response if, for example, your system doesn't like numerical entry very much. So 1, 2, 3, 4 or more children. Again, always have a prefer not to say option on that. We want to emphasize here, and this little tag is going to be on the next couple slides, with any questions asked, it's important that colleges have a planned use for the data. This isn't just pure research. You really want to only ask relevant information so that students aren't burdened by providing answers that won't inform policy or practice. And that's part of what builds trust. You're asking questions that are related to things that are really relevant to the student, to go back to Kimberly's excellent points. If you need information about the ages of children's students, you could ask about their youngest child. What is the age of the youngest child you're parenting? You could also have whether you're parenting at least one child in each age range. If you have sort of a checkbox, check all that applies system, you can condense those age ranges if you want to know, and more about the child's age. Again, my caveat that I won't read again, but I want to make sure it's really obvious that don't ask these things if you don't need to know it, but if it's useful, then it can be informative. You can also have age categories with numeric counts. That's the most detailed, where they say how many children in each age range are they parenting. Again, some data systems don't love you doing this, but if they do, it's great information. You'll know how many kids they have, how old the kids are, and then can tailor supports appropriately. You can also ask some other questions. Single parent, for example, I wanted to point out, are you currently a single parent to any of the children you are parenting? We really prefer this language because people often have complicated lives, and they may be a single parent for some of their children and not for others. They may be co-parenting some children or be with married to the other parent of some of their children and still be single parenting others. I have friends who've been in that situation, and so it's nice to kind of frame it in a way that's very inclusive of folks' complex situations potentially. So with that was a lot. It's all in the brief. If you have questions, though, we're very excited and happy to answer them. But we hope that this becomes a useful, quick reference for folks who are trying to really get down to brass tacks on implementing this. But with that, we are going to break out into discussions by role. We'll have about 20 minutes or so.
But I will share out from our room, and if folks would like to, that were in leading the call, add 1 or 2 points that were highlighted in their breakout room in the chat. I did want to speak to something that was in the student leaders breakout discussion, Xochitl, which is something that I think led to my ability to champion and not only survive but thrive at UC Berkeley as a student parent. And that was Xochitl reframed the status, the shame that student parents sometimes feel when disclosing status, and how is it that we can build trust to share your student parent status. And that's externalizing the problem and framing this as like a systems failure and a systems issue. And that's something that I did. And so you did such a great job about like naming it. I told everybody, I every time I'd go to inquire about supports for student parents at UC Berkeley, I told everyone I have zero imposter syndrome. This isn't like a me issue, but that's because I knew that I worked really hard to get here. And if I was failing, it was a systems problem. And I am equally entitled to like supports as like non-student parents. And so Trudy did such a great job about framing it. And it's amazing to hear that you empower student parents in that way to frame it as a systems issue versus an internalized like individual me issue. So that's something that was elevated from the student leaders group. So I'd love to hear if there were anything that was highlighted from the institutional research or data leads breakout room or breakout room number 3, 4, or 5. I know that we don't have much time, so if folks want to add to the chat and if leads want to unmute and share 1 or 2 points that were elevated for them.
I can talk about the 4, so state and national leaders. So we had a really great discussion about the elements that are important for and the conditions that support good data collection. So there was a lot about champions and the importance of champions, but also some like details where like having legislation and good contracts is going to be important, but also needing that very passionate person who's going to push this effort forward. And then in terms of how we could see Washington become a leader in the national space, we talked about the importance of the longitudinal data collection system and whether there are some nice dovetails with that system and this work, I think can be really incredibly powerful.
I'll just share a bit from room 1. So we had 3 folks who were in data roles at the state level, which was really neat because most of our conversation talked about how the state can be supportive of colleges in collecting and using data on students' parenting status. And we had a wide-ranging discussion about lots of things, but I just appreciated the interest and investment of folks from WASC, from the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges, from ERDC, in trying to be supportive in these efforts and resource to the institutions. And Amy shared some summary from room 3A, and Rita shared from group 5. Were there any others that wanted to share, or folks maybe typing?
I was in I was in the 3rd group, which is student services and college admin leaders. And within that group, we shared quite a bit around how data is helping with outreach, targeted outreach, making an adjustment to basic needs like setting up blockers or creating no eligibility criteria, changing hours. Um, but we also talked about some of the real problems with over surveying with students. There was this thing that was said that there was a thing that was said that was kind of funny and I think makes a really valid point. Survey fatigue is a problem, but even a bigger issue is email fatigue. Um, so yeah, we also talked about how with uh, there is some or no communication with institutional research depending on the institution. Um, so it really varies. And childcare was mentioned several times as a big priority to support student parents.
I added to the chat on group 3A, but since Armin spoke about the kind of campus perspective, I'll just add the comment that the data that is available on parenting students is fragmented. And there was just a lot of enthusiasm about figuring out what is the plan for data collection on the campus level and at the CTC system level that's smart and universal, and then that could support different departments in serving those students. And right now, there's very limited data they reported from admissions office. In one institution, not a CTC, they said that just that there's no data collection happening at the university level. So being able to kind of have that in a systems kind of approach would really support success.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for the share out. So many good insights. And we will kind of collate them and share them to help inform kind of the data collection in Washington in the hopes that we can bring, and your like a summary of your feedback in multiple ways through this type of breakout, but also we do have a survey at the end where we would love some more feedback. So just pitching that. But we talked about, student parent leadership, the importance of student parents, the importance of champions. And so I think, as so often, right, like data is collected and like kind of used, it's like, okay, that's cool in that report, but there are really exciting, innovative ways to really build power with data to make sure that data is used. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about briefly is just how student parent leadership could be used in interpreting and using data. So there is a rubric where you can kind of assess your level of engagement of student parents. And so this came out of the Data to Action Project and was built by the whole group is either student parents of authors or either student parents or caregivers who were caregiving for children while they were in college. And so the rubric really lays out kind of these 4 elements. And so you can move to the next slide, please. But that student parents are included in change efforts is one, whether meetings and spaces feel inclusive, whether student parents are included in data collection and interpretation efforts, and then that student parents are represented and community building efforts are supported within your organization. So those are kind of the 4 big buckets. And I'm going to talk about the third, where student parents are included in data collection and interpretation efforts. Next slide, please. So this slide was from earlier as well, but I'm going to bring it back around so that you can see kind of one example of student parents being included in data collection and interpretation efforts. So this was some research that I did with young parents. And so we analyzed some quantitative national data and basically created PowerPoint slides where the data was on it, and then it had questions for young parents. So these were current high school students, college students, and people who are disconnected from higher education. And so basically they looked at the data and they helped make meaning of it. So I have the experience of being a teen mom, but I knew that I didn't have the only experience of being a teen mom. And so I wanted others who had the experience to look at the data to interpret it with me, because my interpretations are not the only valid interpretations. And so, this is an example of a mom who, in the blue on the right, looked at the data and said, you can't say that it's for lack of interest or that young parents don't value higher education. There's some sort of barrier. So young parents are much less likely to have attended college. That blue line shows that young people who are not parenting, 75% attend college or enrolled, and then 34% have ever attended college who are young parents. So just a huge disparity. So without, some people's interpretation, like we would miss some really important points. Next slide, please. This was kind of a screenshot of the PowerPoint slides that I used to engage young parents in the work. So thinking about student parent data collection more broadly, and when you collect the data, who's helping you interpret it, who's making meaning of it, who's excited and motivated by it. There are these are data placemats, essentially what they're called. And it helped me look at, here's a chart. What do you think this chart means? Why do you think these results are the way they are? And what do you think should be done about this, or who should do something about this? And then I also asked young parents to basically create what their research questions are. So you can move to the next slide. And then I went back to the data and I came back to them. So one mom, or a couple of moms actually, had the same question that kind of blew up a lot of policy work in my mind. So young parents asked, do young parents have family support? And young parents are much less likely to receive their family support across, which, you would kind of expect it to be the opposite, where they might need more support, but no, young parents are expected and often do pay their rent, room, board, and mortgage compared to their peers of the same age. The parents of young parents are less likely to help them with monthly bills, utilities, car payments, credit card bills, and things like that. So a lot of policy kind of expects young parents to help or to have additional support from their family, and often includes their family's income in these policies, but their family is less likely to support them in many ways. So one example of how we've kind of built this into a model is the Young Parent Collective Research and Eval Lab. So these are young parents. The mom on the far left literally had her baby between training sessions, and that's her new baby, Amir. And so they learned some research methods, earned a UW-Madison certificate, and then we paid for stipends, childcare, transportation, meals to get them to and from training. And then several of them are now paid consultants where we're co-evaluating our local WIC program. So thinking about these models and how you can continue to engage and support student parents or young parents in this data collection. So we also asked young parents after the training, why it was important for them or what was helpful about the training. And someone said, it's a safe and supportive space for young parents to share and legitimize their lived experiences. It's crucial to combating isolation and stigma, which Kimberly mentioned was a part of the student parent session, just breakout room earlier. They can learn the power of their experiences and how to use it to their advantage. And then someone said it felt like it was a once in a lifetime chance in early career stages to do work at the intersections that they're most passionate about. And so they're fighting stigmas, needing opportunities to learn and continuous social justice work. So they were glad to be a part of it. So now we'll talk a little bit about some resources for you all as we wrap things up. There is the Spark Collaborative, Student Parent Action Through Research Knowledge. So many good resources on the site, and there is actually a resource library that talks through a lot of different just lists a ton of different student parent resources, including some that we shared with you today about data about student parents. There are publication support, there's a student parent blog, all kinds of really great resources, and Spark itself is kind of a big tent. So it's a collaborative organization across different institutions to collaborate around student parent issues. The Data to Action campaign is has really informed a lot of this data work around student parents. Teresa is a force in that space, and our colleagues, we have a team of many people who are, have wrapped up our work in California, Oregon, and Illinois, and now we're on to Texas and supporting Texas colleges in data collection. And then I mentioned the Young Parent Collective, where it's an organization that I run with young parents. And one of the key pieces we do is the Research and Eval Lab, where young parents help research and evaluate different issues. So check out those. And then I would be remiss as a researcher to not provide another research opportunity. So we have a relatively short survey, quick questions initially, and then some more detailed feedback that we would really, really love your thoughts on this webinar, but more so of interest to us is your feedback on where Washington State could go, whether you want to be engaged, the extent to which you think you could be engaged, or you have ideas about where Washington State could go. So please fill that out. And yeah, I'm trying to remember what the next slide is, but we can also, why don't we, I'll pass it over to Amy to talk about it, but we could go back maybe to the previous slide so everyone has the survey link and it can be right in their face to take the survey. Thank you so much.
We have so much gratitude to our wonderful friends at the Urban Institute for today's session. Thank you so much. We're very grateful to all of you who have joined this session, and for those who may be watching it in the recording, we would love to have your feedback on the survey. I'm really uplifting that because we'd like to stay in connection with you and colleagues who couldn't make it today as we build our efforts in Washington. We need your insights, the challenges you're facing, the great practices you may have going on at your campus, or your thoughts about where we could head. So please do that. And we will be seeking to engage you in the next webinar in this series. So the next webinar is going to be focused on campus practices and policies to support parenting students. That is on March 31st. And when I email this recording out to all of the registrants, we'll really encourage you to join us for the next